The ranger's name was never released. That's the first thing you notice when you start pulling the records. Summer 2023, Furnace Creek. A National Park Service employee, trained, experienced. Someone who had worked that desert before collapsed on the asphalt. The pavement temperature that day was 127 degrees Fahrenheit under your boots. Hot enough to cook an egg in under 5 minutes. Hot enough that the rubber soles of your shoes begin to deform. That number takes a second read. 127 degrees is not air temperature. That is what the ground was doing. The air was worse. Death Valley hit temperatures within a fraction of the all-time world record set at the exact same location in 1913, 134 degrees Fahrenheit, though that century-old reading is disputed by some meteorologists. And the ranger went down anyway. A ranger. Death Valley saw multiple heat-related emergencies in 2023. Deaths, dehydration collapses, cardiac events triggered by temperatures the human body simply was not designed to handle. And yet roughly 1.1 million visitors walked into that valley that year, on purpose, with cameras, some with children. You, if you are finding this interesting, subscribe so we can bring more to the channel. The valley sits 282 feet below sea level at Badwater Basin, the lowest point in North America, surrounded by mountain ranges that trap heat like a bowl. The Panamint Range to the west rises above 11,000 feet, blocking Pacific moisture. The Black Mountains press in from the east. What you get inside is a pressure cooker with no exit valve. Hot air sinks, it compresses, it heats further. Stand at Badwater for a moment. Salt flat stretches 3 kilometers in every direction, white and blinding. The light reflects upward from the ground and downward from the sky simultaneously. Your skin feels it from both directions at once. In July, the average high is 116 degrees. Average. That is the middle of the distribution. Half the days are hotter. The ranger who collapsed survived. Recovery details unknown. What the Park Service said publicly was minimal heat emergency, employee transported, investigation ongoing. What they did not say was how close it came. There was no clean story about survival waiting in those records. What turned up instead was a body count and a question that keeps getting bigger the longer you sit with it. Because the permanent residents of Death Valley, the ones who were here before the rangers, before the tourists, before the asphalt that nearly killed a trained professional, some families have lived inside or directly adjacent to this valley for generations. The Timbisha Shoshone have called this place home for over 1,000 years. 1,000 years of 127-degree pavement. And they did not survive it by accident. That line keeps pulling, because what took longer than expected to actually understand goes beyond heat tolerance or clever water storage. The Timbisha Shoshone did not simply endure Death Valley, they read it. Every canyon wind, every pre-dawn temperature drop, every plant that flowers 3 weeks earlier when the aquifer is low. 1,000 years of reading the same text until the text became instinct. That knowledge is still here, pieces of it. And the people holding those pieces are watching something change underneath their feet that the tourists driving through in air-conditioned SUVs cannot see, and the rangers are only beginning to measure. Death Valley recorded 130 degrees Fahrenheit in August 2020, Furnace Creek, the highest reliably measured air temperature on the planet since 1913, according to the World Meteorological Organization. But that number alone will not kill you. What kills you is the floor staying near 118 degrees at 3 in the morning, when your body expected the desert to finally relent, when every survival system you have was counting on those cooler hours to reset. The nights are shrinking. The overnight lows have climbed roughly 5 degrees Fahrenheit in the last 50 years, according to monitoring data from the National Park Service's Furnace Creek station. 5 degrees off the bottom sounds minor. Pull up a map of human physiology, and it is not minor at all. The body dissipates heat by being warmer than the air around it. When the air around it stops being cooler, that system stalls. Sweat still evaporates. Death Valley is dry enough for that, sometimes under 10% humidity, but the core temperature stops dropping the way it needs to. You sleep. You wake up already behind. Rangers know this. The ones stationed at Furnace Creek, sitting nearly 200 feet below sea level, brief every backcountry permit holder on it. Those briefing documents are worth reading slowly. They are not dramatic. They are very specific about very small windows. 2 liters of water per hour in direct sun. Plan your miles before 10 a.m. If you feel fine, you are probably not fine yet. But the briefing is designed for visitors. People with an exit. People who drove in and will drive out. Now, imagine you were born here. Your grandmother was born here. The springs your family mapped are still mapped, but 2 of the 4 are flowing at roughly half the volume they held in 1980. The creosote is still there. The salt flats still hurt your eyes at noon. But the margin, that precise, hard-won margin between surviving and not, has gotten thinner every decade, and the thinning is not slowing down. What the Timbisha Shoshone built over 1,000 years was calibrated to a desert that no longer quite exists. Pull up a map. Find California. Slide your eyes southeast, past the Sierra Nevada, past the Panamint Range, until the elevation numbers go negative. That is where you are. Death Valley sits inside the Basin and Range Province, a geological accordion that has been pulling apart for 30 million years. Long strips of crust between parallel fault lines. The valley floor does not just sit low, it has been falling, slowly, tectonically, but still falling. Badwater Basin is 282 feet below sea level, the lowest point in North America. But the number that matters more than the depth is what surrounds it. The Panamint Range to the west rises to 11,043 feet at Telescope Peak. That wall of rock is less than 20 miles from the basin floor. 20 miles. You can stand at Badwater and look up at snow in January. That elevation difference, nearly 2.5 vertical miles, compressed into a horizontal distance you could drive in 20 minutes, is the engine. Air descends the eastern slope of the Panamint Range and compresses. Every 1,000 feet it drops, it gains roughly 5 degrees. By the time that air hits the valley floor, it has been wrung dry and heated like a blast from an open kiln. Meteorologists call it adiabatic warming. The desert calls it Tuesday. The basin shape does the rest. The valley runs roughly north to south, 130 miles long, 15 miles across at its widest. Those dimensions matter. Heat radiates off the salt flats, and the alluvial fans rises, and then the surrounding ranges bounce it back. There is nowhere for it to go. The air above the floor stays hot through the night because the ground, caliche, salt crust, dark volcanic rock, releases what it absorbed all day, slowly, like a storage heater that never fully empties before morning comes and loads it again. Clouds rarely form. The valley receives less than 2 inches of rain per year on average. Without moisture in the atmosphere, there is nothing to scatter incoming solar radiation, nothing to hold a lid on outgoing ground heat at night. The sun hammers down through clear air, and the floor sends it back up. You are inside a lens. On the 10th of July, 1913, a weather station in Furnace Creek recorded 134 degrees Fahrenheit, 56.7 degrees Celsius. That reading has stood for over a century as the officially recognized air temperature record, though some meteorologists have questioned its accuracy. Anywhere on this planet. A regional record, a national record, the record for Earth. And the station was measuring air temperature in the shade, 4 feet above the ground. Ground surface temperatures in Death Valley routinely push past 190 degrees Fahrenheit, hot enough to cook an egg in about 10 minutes, hot enough to melt the rubber sole of a shoe left sitting too long in one place. The geology did not choose this accidentally. Every feature compounds the last. The basin traps heat from every direction at once. The surrounding ranges, Panamint to the west, Amargosa to the east, block the marine air that cools most of the Mojave. Wind that might carry relief loses its moisture climbing those peaks, then compresses and heats again as it drops toward the valley floor. By the time it reaches Furnace Creek, it arrives hotter than when it started. The valley sits 282 feet below sea level. There is nowhere for that heat to go, so it stays. Now add water, or the absence of it. Furnace Creek records an average annual rainfall of 2.2 inches. 2 inches. The City of London gets roughly 23. Phoenix, which most people already think of as brutal, gets 8. Death Valley gets a quarter of Phoenix's rain and calls it a normal year. The ground cannot hold what it never receives, so the soil here is a kind of dry concrete-packed salt, cracked mud, mineral flats that have not seen standing water in decades. Anything that falls evaporates before it soaks in. The few hundred people who live and work in the valley year-round, the staff at Furnace Creek Ranch, the park workers. The handful who have simply decided this is home drink roughly 1.5 gallons of water per person per day in summer. That is the medical baseline. Some go higher. Rangers doing field work in July have logged closer to 2 gallons before noon. The water supply runs on 2 tracks. There is a spring system at Furnace Creek, fed by the Amargosa Aquifer, that has supplied water since the borax mining days of the 1880s. The National Park Service maintains and monitors it, but spring output is fixed and slow, and the summer population, tourists included, can spike to several thousand on a single day. When the springs fall short, the valley depends on trucks. Water hauled in on State Route 190, the lifeline that climbs in from the Amargosa side, the only paved road that stays consistently open. One road, one supply line, pipes buried underground that, in July, pushes past 190 degrees, connect storage tanks to taps. The infrastructure is aging. A rupture in the main line in August 2022 left Furnace Creek without reliable water pressure for several days, while crews worked in heat that was, at that point, averaging 117 degrees Fahrenheit during daylight hours. The workers fixing the pipe were sweating through their gear in conditions that can kill an unprotected person in under 2 hours. They had to finish because everyone waiting at the other end of that pipe needed them to. Now the uncomfortable part. The spring is not bottomless. The aquifer it feeds from has shown measurable decline over the past 4 decades. Slower recharge, higher draw, and the one road that carries backup water runs directly through flash flood country. Those aquifer numbers sit with you, but the water problem is only half of what keeps Furnace Creek running. The other half is people. Specific people who agreed, in writing, to spend 12 months in a place that averages more than a month of days above 120 every summer. Rangers. Resort staff. The ones who stay when everyone else drives back to Las Vegas. The assumption most people make is that there's some kind of rotation. 2 weeks on, 2 weeks off. A sensible arrangement. There isn't. The keepers of Furnace Creek Rangers and senior staff who have held these posts since the resort began operating year-round in the 1970s live here. Full stop. Their mail comes here. Their kids, if they have them, go to school in Shoshone, 58 miles south. It's 6 a.m. in July. The air temperature is already 108 degrees. A ranger starts her vehicle check before the first visitors arrive. The steering wheel is hot enough to blister bare skin. The seatbelt buckle metal, sitting in direct sun since yesterday, hits somewhere around 175 degrees on contact. She puts on her gloves, checks the next vehicle, then the next. Routine. The uniform does not help. The Park Service standard issue shirt is long-sleeved by design to block UV radiation because short sleeves in direct Mojave sun cause faster heat gain, not slower. So she wears long sleeves in 120-degree heat and drinks a liter of water every hour she's outside. Miss 1 hour and her body starts signaling danger. Miss 2 and the math gets ugly fast. The resort staff work the same calendar. Housekeeping, kitchen, maintenance, all of them, cycling through shifts in a property where the outdoor pool sits at a sustained 104 degrees, and guests consider that refreshing. One facilities worker told a journalist in 2021 that the hardest part was that the heat never stopped. Furnace Creek's overnight low in August averages around 93 degrees. You don't recover. You just wait for morning and do it again. Most people last 1 season. Some last 2. A rare few build their whole careers there. And those are the ones who carry the institutional knowledge which roads flood first, which water tanks fail quietly, which sections of trail become genuinely lethal after noon in June. By midsummer 2022, a cluster of resignations across different departments left Furnace Creek running peak season short-handed during a stretch when the valley recorded a brutal, unbroken streak of days above 120, the kind of stretch the old-timers measure summers by. What happens to a place like this when the people who know how to run it start doing the math on whether it's worth it? The answer came faster than anyone expected. June 2021. The valley crossed 130 degrees Fahrenheit on the 9th of July 2021, tying the previous modern record set at the same station in August 2020 and measured at Furnace Creek by instruments on site. The NOAA logs confirm it. The number is real. To put that in your body. At 130 degrees, the air you breathe is hotter than a conventional oven set to its lowest setting. Your sweat evaporates before it can cool you. The mechanism your body has used to regulate temperature for 200,000 years stops working. Stops. Hyperthermia has a timeline and it moves fast. At 102 degrees Fahrenheit core temperature, you feel drunk, confused, irritable, convinced you are fine. At 104, the confusion deepens. People sit down in the shade for a moment. Some don't stand back up. At 106, organs start to fail. The kidneys go first. Near 108, proteins in your brain begin to denature. The physical structure of thought breaks down, from first symptom to irreversible damage, under 90 minutes if no one finds you. That summer, the park documented more deaths than any season in the previous decade, multiples of the usual handful. Most were found alone, off-trail, without enough water. Some were in vehicles that had broken down, and at least 2 of the season's dead were taken not by heat, but by water, flash floods. The floods are where the picture inverts. People hear Death Valley and picture drought, cracked earth, nothing miles, but the valley sits inside a watershed. The surrounding ranges, the Panamints to the west, the Amargosa to the east, funnel every drop of rain down into the basin. When monsoon cells hit those peaks in July and August, the water has nowhere to soak in. The ground is baked ceramic. It runs fast. In August 2022, a significant storm caused catastrophic flooding at Furnace Creek. Cars were swept away, the main road washed out in multiple places, and the park temporarily closed. The flood at Scotty's Castle in October 2015, a separate event, caused an estimated $47 million in damages. People caught in that flood were guests at the Furnace Creek Inn. People with reservations, air conditioning, a plan. The valley took them by surprise anyway. Which brings you back to the question the staffing numbers raised. If the people who run this place, who know what June means, who have seen the timeline play out, if they are the ones quietly doing the math and walking away, what does that say about the calculation everyone else is making when they book a summer trip? The math is not complicated. It just takes a minute to sit with it. A few hundred people. That is the permanent population of Death Valley, the entire valley, year-round, spread across an area bigger than Connecticut. Look at that number, then look at the map, then look at the number again. And summer strips even that down. The National Park Service links dozens of deaths to heat in this valley over the past 2 decades, and 2023 added new names to the list. People who had a car, people who had water, people who thought they had a plan. One case that got documented publicly. A 71-year-old man who collapsed outside the restroom at Golden Canyon in July 2023. Temperatures that week touching 121 degrees Fahrenheit. Likely after hiking the trail. He had done everything the scientists told him not to do, but so had the person before him. And the person before that. The rangers who work those rescues, some of them have been stationed at Furnace Creek for years, rotating on contracts that most people burn through in one season and never renew. The ones who stay talk about it a specific way, about arithmetic, how fast a body loses fluid at 120 degrees Fahrenheit, how many minutes between confusion and collapse. How the radio call and the drive and the extraction almost always add up to longer than that. You are driving the only paved road through the valley in July. It is 11 in the morning. The asphalt is soft enough to leave tire marks. You pass a car pulled over on the shoulder with its hazards on. You stop. The couple inside has been sitting for 40 minutes waiting for the engine to cool down enough to move. They have half a bottle of water between them. They are from Portland. They left Furnace Creek at 10. That is a rescue that does not make the fatality data. That couple drove home. The ones who stay permanently through August, through the years that stack into decades, they are not tourists who fell in love with the landscape and decided to tough it out. Most of them are second or third generation. Their parents worked the borax operations, or the park service, or the inn. The valley is the job, and the job is the valley, and the heat is just the condition the job comes with, the way a fisherman in Alaska does not decide whether the water is cold. A woman whose family has worked the Furnace Creek area since the 1970s put it plainly when a journalist asked her why she stays. She said she stops noticing the temperature around mid-June. Her body just recalibrates. What she left hanging was what it costs to recalibrate, and whether you ever fully come back. That phrase stayed. Because there is a second adaptation nobody talks about, the one that happens when you stop thinking the shade will save you. Pull up a map of Death Valley. Those narrow canyons cutting through the Panamint Range. The ones that look like relief from the outside Mosaic Canyon, Marble Canyon, Grotto Canyon. On a 118-degree afternoon, they are the most logical place on Earth to be. The rock walls climb 60, 80 feet on either side. The sun hits for maybe 2 hours a day. The temperature drops 15, sometimes 20 degrees the moment you step in. Your nervous system exhales. Here is where it gets serious. A slot canyon is also a funnel, a perfect geological funnel. Rain can fall 40 miles away and visible from where you're standing, maybe falling on a ridgeline you've never heard of, and the water has nowhere to go except down the drainage, down the canyon, toward you. In October 2015, a flash flood tore through the backcountry near Scotty's castle in the Northern Valley. The flood moved so fast it lifted vehicles. It rerouted a road that had been in the same place since the 1930s. The National Park Service clocked debris fields stretching over 4 miles. Scotty's castle itself took on damage that closed the site for years. 3 tourists were trapped, none drowned, which feels more like luck than design when you study the photographs of what was left. At the mouth of one of those canyons in early September, the sky overhead runs that specific blue that feels borrowed from somewhere kinder. But 15 miles north, over a ridge you cannot see, clouds can be building. That's all it takes. The math is brutal. You need the shade to survive the heat. The shade lives in the canyon. The canyon kills you if it rains anywhere in a watershed the size of a small county, and you cannot see the rain. You cannot hear it coming until the sound that low, wet roar is already too close. Locals learn the skies the way other people learn faces. The ones who grew up here, the park rangers who've done 15 summers, they look north before they step into any drainage. They watch the color of the clouds over the Amargosa Range. They trust their gut over the forecast, because the forecast covers a region the size of Connecticut, and a flash flood is a thing that happens in a corridor 50 feet wide. The canyon gives you the temperature you need to survive. Then sometimes it fills. What nobody has fully solved, what the Park Service itself acknowledges in its backcountry guidelines, is that there is no warning system that reaches you once you're inside. Your phone has no signal. The sky above you is a rectangle. And the water, when it comes faster than a person can run. There is one road into Furnace Creek, one road out. And the power line that feeds the resort, the ranger station, the fuel pumps, all of it runs along that same corridor for roughly 100 miles before it reaches anything resembling a grid. The nearest real grid is an hour and a half away. On a good day, Pahrump to the east, Barstow far to the south. Neither one is close, and neither one is quick. It is July. The ground temperature is pushing 190 degrees. A transformer blows somewhere along that line, not dramatically, not with fire, just a soft failure, the kind that takes crews 2 hours to locate. The AC units in the oasis at Death Valley cut off at 2:14 in the afternoon. The indoor temperature in a room with no airflow in Furnace Creek crosses 104 degrees in under 90 minutes. Park physiologist data from heat casualty reports puts cognitive impairment, confusion, poor decision-making starting around 102 degrees core body temperature. The gap between a functioning person and a person who cannot help themselves is smaller than most people think. About an hour, sometimes less. The resort runs backup generators. They have fuel reserves for roughly 72 hours under normal load, but normal load assumes the generators are running the kitchen, the lights, maybe some pumps. Throw full air conditioning demand on top, and that estimate compresses fast. The Park Service has contingency protocols, shelter-in-place advisories, water rationing. Rangers know the drill. What rangers will also tell you, quietly, is that the valley hosts around 1 million visitors a year, and a meaningful fraction of them arrive without reading a single advisory. They stop for photographs. They walk onto the salt flats in sandals. They are from Minnesota, or Munich, or Seoul, and the heat feels intense, but manageable right up to the moment it is neither. The 48-hour window is the one that keeps facilities managers up at night. Past that point, if the line is still down, if parts have to come from somewhere, if the road is compromised by a flash flood or a rock slide, you are looking at a population of tourists. Some of them elderly, some with medical conditions, sitting in concrete buildings that have become ovens. The valley's core settlement holds only a couple dozen true year-rounders. Everyone else is passing through, and passing through means they trusted infrastructure they have never seen and cannot fix. The Park Service has plans, good plans, detailed plans, evacuation routes, mutual aid agreements with Inyo County, protocols for triaging heat casualties, and those plans assume the road is open. Twice in the last decade, it was not. Pull up a map of Death Valley and look at the basin floor. Badwater, 282 feet below sea level. The lowest point in North America. What the map does not show, what takes a while to actually process, is that the number is changing. The valley floor is sinking. Millimeters per year, measured by GPS stations and satellite interferometry, verified by the USGS over multiple monitoring cycles. Millimeters add up. And in a closed basin where the margin between alive and dead is already measured in hours, the direction of travel matters. The mechanism is groundwater extraction. The aquifers beneath Death Valley and the surrounding Mojave have been drawn down for decades. Agriculture, municipal supply, the kind of demand that does not pause when temperatures climb past 120 degrees Fahrenheit. When you pull water out of sediment that has been saturated for thousands of years, the sediment compacts. The ground above it drops, slow, measurable, and not reversing. Now hold that against everything we've already seen. The springs that feed Furnace Creek, the ones keeping the date palms alive, the ones the Timbisha Shoshone organized their entire seasonal existence around those springs are tied to the same aquifer system. The ranch at Furnace Creek pumps roughly 2,000 acre-feet of groundwater per year. 2,000. 1 acre-foot is about 326,000 gallons. Run that math and sit with it for a second. The National Park Service has been negotiating water rights in the valley since the 1990s. There are agreements, there are reduction targets, and the springs are still declining. A 2019 monitoring report documented measurable drops in flow at several of the valley's key discharge points, the kind that accumulate quietly while the resort stays open and the tourists keep arriving and the 20 permanent residents keep filling their glasses from the tap. When the subsidence data first came up, it read like geological curiosity. Then consider where the infrastructure sits. The roads, the pipelines, the buildings at Furnace Creek, some of which date to the 1920s and were built on what was considered stable ground. Ground that is now, demonstrably, less stable than it was. Differential settling where one section of earth drops faster than the adjacent section is what cracks foundations, misaligns pipe joints, buckles asphalt in ways that look like ordinary wear until a pipe fails during a heat event and you have no water pressure at the only tap for 80 miles. The evacuation plans assume the road is open. The survival plans assume the water is running, and the thing quietly undermining both of those assumptions has been happening beneath everyone's feet for decades, unannounced, measured only by instruments most visitors have never heard of. And yet people stay. The engineers who mapped those pipe failures did not leave. The rangers who watched the thermometers tick past 130 degrees Fahrenheit did not request transfers. Furnace Creek has had permanent residents through conditions that would qualify as a humanitarian crisis anywhere else on the continent. The veterans of the visitor center know the evacuation routes better than the people who wrote them. They have watched the parking lot empty in under 4 minutes during a flash flood warning. They stayed through the 2021 heat event when the record fell. Ask them why, and the answer that keeps coming back is worth writing down. Out here, everything that matters is visible. It lands differently than expected. In a city, infrastructure is hidden. The systems keeping you alive run under streets, inside walls, above ceilings. You never see them until they fail. Death Valley strips all of that away. The pipe is exposed. The road is visible from the ridge. The water tank is right there, 30 feet off the highway, with a gauge you can read from your car window. The danger is legible, in a way most places aren't. That legibility, that's what people are actually attached to. When the ground shifts under a city no one knows for weeks, here you feel it. Survival becomes something you can practice, not just hope for. That changes a person, quietly, over years, in ways that don't show up in any data set. The valley has been measuring human endurance since prospectors walked out of it in 1849 carrying almost nothing. Those who made it read the terrain faster than it could read them. Toughness had far less to do with it than legend claims. The ones who stay now are doing the same thing, just with better instruments and worse odds on the infrastructure. Which brings up something worth sitting with. The systems built to keep this place habitable were designed for a climate that no longer exists. The temperature averages that informed pipe specs, road materials, water pressure calculations, those numbers came from a Death Valley that peaked lower